Good morning, photography students. So I'm going to be going over how we can edit different ways for our intentional camera movement, our ICM photos. So as always, I would recommend to right-click on a photo or press Control and click on a photo and choose Duplicate. And right-click on the duplicated copy and open that in the Camera Raw. So always want to save our original in case we mess up our edit. So depending on how you shot your photos, you might have really bright exposure, especially if you shot outside and it's using a slower shutter speed. It's gathering a lot of light, which sometimes you might need to bring down your exposure. So I do recommend to play with the exposure slider in Camera Raw. That is very useful to adjusting the exposure to the right amount of brightness. For this one, we want to bring out the streaks, right? And so adding some clarity will kind of help that. Adding a little bit of texture will help that too. You can also kind of play with dehaze. Dehaze is sort of like a modified contrast where you can kind of cut through and add clarity and contrast to your photo. So once you add dehaze, sometimes it gets darker, so I might want to adjust my overall exposure again just to kind of show the right amount of brightness. So that's looking pretty good. Here's the before and after. If you press the letter P, you can see what it was before and after on the keyboard. So press P on the keyboard. And then let's make sure to save it out. So really kind of modifying the exposure, contrast, clarity, and maybe a little bit of dehaze to adjust to see the streaks better in our movements. This one is a 16-bit, so I'm just going to modify it to 8-bit. So go to image mode. So if you aren't able to save as a JPEG, just go to image mode, switch this to 8-bit, and that way you can actually save it as a JPEG. Sometimes the camera raws are set to 16-bit. You can switch in the settings. I can show you in the next photo. So I'm just saving it out. So I should have the nice edited photo. I'm actually going to give that a 2-star. There we go. So sometimes, depending on if you're shooting in different environments, the white balance might get wrong. So I'm going to make a duplicate copy of this one, and then right-click and open in Camera Raw. So you could do the auto adjustment. Sometimes that works. It depends on what other colors are in your photo. So you might want to manually adjust your temperature just to kind of get it to a good place. So this one actually would benefit from me kind of lowering, the highlights a little bit just because they're kind of blown out, and then playing with the clarity again and maybe a little dehaze, just kind of bring out the definition of our streaks, and then being able to modify it so you can actually see them more clearly. And so we're kind of playing with, what's our exposure, maybe adding some contrast and dehaze so you can really bring out the definition. So this is before and after. So notice how much more kind of clear we can get through some of these parts, and then make sure you open them into Photoshop and then saving them out. So I'm going to switch this mode to 16-bit to 8-bit. And save it as a JPEG. So make sure it's JPEG format, hit save and replace and OK on the quality. So for our selective color, what we want to do is be able to get one color to really stand out well. So I'm going to open this into Camera Raw. So obviously we can modify it with the clarity, and dehaze, maybe some contrast, and adjust the exposure as needed. And so once we get the exposure how we want, you can play, with the white balance as well. But what we want to do is to get this red color to pop. So I'm going to go into the color mixer tab. I'm going to click on saturation, so not hue but saturation. And so what I want to do is to modify and desaturate the colors that I don't want to pop out. Let's give her some yellows, maybe some orange. So the orange is kind of affecting our reds because they're in between. And then I could increase my reds just to get those to pop. So really what we're trying to do is figure out what color stands out and which color do we want to have stand out. And so that way we can actually desaturate those other colors to get that one to stand out, and maybe increasing the color of the one color to get it to stand out a little bit more. So that's our selective color. And then I'm actually going to switch this. If you want to switch this so it's 18-bit, if you go under your workflow and then under depth, if you switch it to 8-bit and hit OK, when you open your photos, you should be able to save them out as JPEGs directly. You won't need to actually switch to 8-bit because it's already at 8-bit. So I'm just going to save that as. And then we're save and replace it. So that's a good selective color edit. So lastly, you will notice that using the flash will define your photo a little differently. It'll actually get your subject a little bit more frozen looking. Hold on, I need to go back. Let's make a duplicate first. And then open that in the camera. So obviously my white balance is a little off, so I'm going to go to my basic tab. You could sample it if it is the black background, and you could do a little sample to kind of correct the colors. Looks a little too green. I'm going to correct that a little bit. There we go. And then, you could adjust, see how if I adjust my highlights, how those highlights show up a little differently. Add some clarity and some contrast. I'm actually going to bring the blacks down so the background goes a little darker. There we go. That's looking better. A little touch of dehaze. So this is the before and after. So playing with your blacks, your shadows, especially on a black background like this, it will kind of highlight the subject better and get these colors and the motion of this to stand out better. You can see here before and after, right? So just the temperature, and just in my contrast, just in my highlights, how bright do I want my highlights? Just the blacks, so trying to bring the background so it's a little darker. Then adding some clarity will help define those streaks a little bit better. And a touch of dehaze just to kind of cut through. Is that looking pretty good? These blue is just a shadow clipping warning. I'm okay if it actually does go black just because I want it to be black. And so it's just letting me know it's pure black. So I'm just going to open that into Photoshop and then save these out. JPEG format, save and replace. Cool. So thanks for watching this tutorial on how we can edit for our ICM photos.